imagine you're walking into like a traditional Chinatown in Southeast Asia. You're looking for a piece of your heritage.
Right, a connection to something familiar.
Exactly, a connection to a culture you left behind. So you step under this really ornate traditional archway. You're surrounded by red lanterns, right?
Yeah.
Glowing against the night sky in Yogyakarta, Indonesia. The air smells of incense and frying food. And the very first thing guarding this ancient-looking cultural gateway is a giant plastic mascot.
Which is just, yeah.
A corporate supermarket bear from Taiwan.
It is a completely jarring image. I mean, it really feels like a glitch in reality.
A total glitch. You look at this plastic bear like the Foolie Bear from Taiwan's PX Mart grocery chain, and you just wonder, why is this here?
Did it get lost?
Right. Is it doing like freelance cultural work on the weekends? But then you look closer at the crowd and you realize the dissonance goes much, much deeper than just a misplaced piece of corporate branding.
Oh, absolutely. It's not just the bear.
No, it's not. You are surrounded by people wearing the costumes of your culture, blasting nostalgic pop songs from, early 2000s television dramas.
Yeah, but no one around you can actually read the Chinese characters painted on the temple doors.
Exactly. And you, standing there in the middle of it all, you are the only one who knows what those characters actually mean.
But you are completely invisible to everyone around you.
It is a profoundly lonely image. And that intense, almost hallucinatory sense of isolation is exactly what we are exploring today.
It really is a deep feeling to unpack.
It is. So if you are joining us, and I'm talking to you, listening right now, whether you've ever moved to a new city, a new country, or, just tried to reinvent yourself, you probably know that feeling of chasing a clean slate.
Oh, definitely. We pack our bags, board a plane, and just assume that geography is this, ultimate reset button.
Yes, the geographic reset button. But today we are going into a deep dive on what happens when that reset button fails entirely.
And we have some incredible source material for this today.
We really do.
We are pulling from this fascinating collection of writings from a Taiwanese expatriate who has lived long-term in Yogyakarta.
Which people usually just call Jogja, right?
Right, Jogja in Indonesia. And we have these 3 deeply analytical social essays from him, plus 2 interconnected fictional short stories.
And those stories are based entirely on his lived emotional reality. But we should probably set some ground rules right off the bat here.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
We are not doing, a geopolitical breakdown of Southeast Asia today.
No trade routes or diplomatic maneuvering.
None of that. This is a quiet, deeply personal, and honestly quite melancholic exploration of human identity. What does it actually mean to be Taiwanese in a place like Indonesia?
Right. What happens when you are trapped in a labyrinth of external labels that you didn't even choose?
Exactly. When your culture is commodified but completely unrecognized by the locals, and, when the personal, tragic trauma you fled your homeland to escape just follows you right to your new dinner table.
It's the exploration of a concept we could call double rootlessness.
Double rootlessness. I like that.
Yeah, it's like when the local version of your culture has been severed from its origins by a brutal history, and your own personal roots are too painful to hold on to, where do you actually plant yourself?
That is the big question. So let's start with, I guess, the most basic building block of identity, which is what you actually call yourself.
The labels.
The labels. Because when I was reading through the author's observations on language, my head started spinning.
That's a lot to take in.
It is. Just the vocabulary used in Indonesia to describe someone of Chinese or Taiwanese descent is a total labyrinth.
It is incredibly fraught. In many parts of the world, if you are from Taiwan, you simply say, I am Taiwanese, or I'm from Taiwan.
Right, keep it simple.
But in Indonesia, the language surrounding Chinese ethnic identity is carrying centuries of baggage.
So break this down for me, because I think a lot of people listening might assume it's just, a matter of direct translation.
Yeah, you might.
But there are 4 or 5 distinct terms floating around in everyday language.
Let's look at the primary ones. First, you have the word Sina.
Okay, Sina.
In a direct translation, it simply means China. And Orang Sina means Chinese people. But historically in Indonesia, especially during certain political eras, that term took on a really derogatory or highly marginalized tone.
Oh, wow. So it's not just a neutral descriptor at all.
Not at all. Then you have Sindo.
Right, I saw that one a lot.
Yeah, this is a portmanteau blending Sina and Indo to refer specifically to Chinese Indonesians.
Got it.
People of ethnic Chinese descent who have been in the archipelago for generations who are, Indonesian citizens.
Okay, so Sindo is a demographic reality, but then I kept seeing the word Qinghoa. Where does that one fit in?
So Jinhua comes from the Hokkien dialect.
Right.
It is generally used to refer to ethnic Chinese people in a more respectful, cultural, or community-oriented sense.
Okay, so it has a different flavor to it.
Exactly. If you're talking about Chinese traditions, associations, or the broader diaspora identity, Tionghoa is the term. And finally, you have Tiongkok, which is the modern, official, formal term used by the Indonesian government and media.
To refer to what specifically?
To refer to the state of China, the People's Republic of China.
Okay, so if I'm an ethnic Chinese person born in Jakarta or Jogja, I'm navigating all of these constantly.
Every single day.
I might be referred to as Sindo casually. My cultural heritage is Tionghoa, and the country my ancestors came from centuries ago is Tiongkok.
Precisely. The language forces you to constantly calibrate your relationship to history, to the state, and to your own ethnicity.
But wait, our author isn't a Chinese Indonesian whose family has been there for generations.
No, he's not.
He is an expatriate straight from Taiwan. So how does Taiwan fit into this incredibly rigid, highly structured linguistic ecosystem?
It basically doesn't.
It does?
No, and that is exactly where the psychological trap begins.
Yeah.
In the Indonesian linguistic framework, the concept of Taiwan is, well, it's an anomaly.
How so?
It is handled with this bizarre mixture of extreme diplomatic caution and just total bureaucratic arbitrariness.
Okay, to illustrate this, the author shares a story about his graduation from Universitas Gadjah Mada, UGM.
Right, one of the oldest and most prestigious universities in Indonesia.
Yeah. And I was reading this sequence of events, and I actually had to stop and reread it because it felt like, I don't know, a Kafka novel.
It really does. It's the perfect microcosm of his daily life. Walk us through what happens to him on graduation day.
Okay, so picture this. He has put in the years of work, right? He has done the research. He is finally getting his degree.
A huge moment.
Huge moment. He logs into the university's official registration system to do his final paperwork. And right there on the screen, the system lists his nationality as Taiwan, province of China.
Which is a deeply loaded geopolitical label.
Very loaded.
It's the kind of terminology you see enforced by international pressure on, like, airline booking websites or global corporate databases.
It's everywhere.
He didn't type that in. The institutional system just imposed it on him.
Exactly. So he swallows that because, I mean, what else can he do? He wants his degree. Then comes the actual graduation ceremony. He is sitting in the hall wearing the gown. Up on the giant screens, they are projecting slides with the details of the graduates as they prepare to walk across the stage.
And what does it say?
On the official slide, his origin is listed as Chinese Taipei.
Chinese Taipei. Now we have a completely different label.
Yeah, where does that even come from in this context?
Well, Chinese Taipei is a diplomatic compromise invented entirely for international sports, specifically the Olympics.
Oh, right, the Olympic flag.
Yeah. The author notes that some major Indonesian newspapers, like Compass, will use Chinese Taipei when they're covering badminton or weightlifting, but they use Taiwan for economic news.
Wow, so it's situational.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And UGM, the university, seems to have just blindly adopted the sports convention for their academic ceremony.
That is so weird. So he's a province in the database, and he's an Olympic delegation on the projector.
Right.
Then they call his name to walk across the stage. The MC, holding the microphone, reads his name to the entire auditorium and announces that he is Dari Taiwan, from Taiwan.
A third label.
A third label.
And this one is the colloquial everyday reality. The MC just uses the word that regular human beings use when they're speaking to one another.
So he walks across the stage, shakes the hand, and is handed his physical hard copy graduation certificate, the actual document he will frame and put on his wall.
And what does the certificate say?
He looks down at it, and his nationality is officially printed as Taiwanese.
Unbelievable. 4 different labels in one single institutional process.
Yep. Province, Olympic delegation, geographic location, and independent nationality.
Think about how maddening that is.
It's insane. It's like going to a formal dinner party where you know absolutely no one.
Right.
At the front door, the host hands you a name tag that says John's cousin. You walk into the dining room and the place card at your seat says guest 42.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
Right. Then the waiter comes over and addresses you as sir, and then the person sitting next to you insists on calling you by your actual first name.
You have zero agency over your own identity in this space.
Zero. You just have to passively accept whatever reality the person standing in front of you has decided is true at that exact moment.
And that lack of agency is the crucial point here. He jokes about it, of course.
He does, yeah.
He tells a friend, like, oh, UGM really knows how to choose the right words. But he immediately clarifies to us that this is a dark joke. It's gallows humor.
Because, what is he supposed to do? Argue with the projector screen?
Exactly. The psychological toll of this ambiguity isn't just a minor annoyance. It's a profound sense of unreality.
Unreality.
Yeah, these labels aren't just words. They represent massive historical forces. From Dutch colonialism categorizing populations to modern global geopolitics to Indonesian foreign policy.
All weighing down on him.
And all of these massive invisible forces are converging on this one guy who literally just wants to get his diploma.
Wow.
If the society around you cannot consistently name what you are, you become untethered. Your identity just becomes fragmented.
And it naturally follows that if the words used to describe your existence are fragmented, any attempt to find a physical space that reflects your identity is going to be equally confusing.
Oh, absolutely.
Which brings us back to that giant plastic bear in Ketandan, Chinatown.
We really need to unpack the historical context of that Chinatown in Yogyakarta, because without it, the author's experience there just sounds like, a critique of a bad festival.
Like he's just leaving a bad Yelp review or something.
Right. But it is so much heavier than that.
Because Jogja is not exactly known as a global hub of Chinese culture, is it?
No, not at all.
Yep.
While ethnic Chinese people make up the fourth largest population in the massive nation of Indonesia, in Yogyakarta specifically, the demographic is overwhelmingly Javanese.
Like how overwhelmingly?
We're talking about an area that is roughly 95% Javanese.
Okay, so a Chinatown in this specific city is a minority space operating within a massive, deeply rooted majority culture.
Yes. But the reason the culture inside that Chinatown looks the way it does is rooted in a truly devastating survival mechanism. Right. The author is very careful not to judge the local Sindo community for what has been lost, because they didn't just casually forget their heritage. It was beaten out of them.
You're talking about the period from 1965 to 1998. The source material refers to this as the Black History.
Yes, the New Order era under President Suharto. It is vital to understand this context.
Go ahead, lay it out for us.
Following the anti-communist purges of 1965 and 1966, the Indonesian state systematically forced the assimilation of the ethnic Chinese population.
Systematically?
Yes. It wasn't a suggestion. It was a severe, state-sponsored cultural suppression. Chinese language schools were forcibly closed down.
Wow.
The public display of Chinese characters was banned. Traditional festivals like the Lunar New Year were restricted from public celebration. People were pressured to change their Chinese names to Indonesian-sounding names.
So if you were a Chinese family living in Jogja in the 1970s, choosing to assimilate, choosing to speak Javanese or Indonesian at home, maybe choosing to convert to Islam or Christianity, these weren't just casual lifestyle choices.
They were necessary tactics to survive. To survive in a politically hostile, sometimes violently hostile environment.
That is so heavy.
It is. If a government bans the teaching of a language, within 2 generations, that language is gone. The transmission line is completely cut. The deep roots of the culture are severed.
And what you are left with is just the visual aesthetic, the ornamental shell.
Yes, just the shell.
Which is exactly what the author walks into during the Lunar New Year festival in Ketandan. He goes there with an Indonesian friend, mostly because, as he admits, it's one of the few times of the year he can easily find pork dishes in Muslim-majority Jogja.
A very practical reason.
Very practical. But as he walks through the festival, the disconnect between him and the environment just becomes suffocating.
Describe what he sees, because the details he picks up on here are just fascinating.
Okay, so he looks at the local youth, the Sindo population, who are under 30. They are the ones organizing this festival to showcase their culture to the Javanese majority. But they don't speak the language. The author notes they might know, like a few fragmented words of Hakka or Taiwanese Hokkien, but almost none of them speak Mandarin.
The language is lost to them.
Right. And they certainly cannot read the Chinese characters written on the decorations they are literally hanging up.
So they are hosting a cultural exhibition using a script that is completely alien to them.
Exactly. And because they have lost the deep historical root, they have to fill the void with whatever they can find. And what they found is pop culture.
Pop culture.
It is a bizarre pastiche of pan-Asian media.
Right, because if your own authentic heritage was banned from your grandparents, where do you learn what Chinese looks like? You learn it from television.
Yes. So he sees people in cosplay dressed up as characters from Journey to the West, but it's clearly not based on the classic literature.
What is it based on?
It's based on old Hong Kong television adaptations that were dubbed and broadcast in Indonesia decades ago.
That makes total sense.
And the soundtrack to the festival isn't traditional music. They are blasting Andy Lau's classic Lunar New Year song, Gongjini Jinkai.
Which is, standard enough for a Lunar New Year celebration.
Sure, but right after that, the speakers start blaring nostalgic pop tracks from the early 2000s Taiwanese drama Meteor Garden.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. They're playing Harlem Yu's song King Fei De Yi while people are walking around looking at red lanterns.
That is surreal.
It's like going to an America historical festival and the soundtrack is just the theme song to Friends mixed with, like, a Mariah Carey Christmas album.
It is a reconstructed memory of a culture pieced together from imported VHS tapes and CDs.
And in the middle of all this is our author. He is walking around and he realizes with this sinking feeling that he is the only person in the vicinity who can actually decode the authentic elements that have survived.
The only one.
The only one. He looks at the couplets pasted on the doorways, and he is the only one who can read the poetry. He looks at the imposing statue on the altar, and he's the only one who knows it is Guan Yu, the god of war. He is the only one who knows the proper ritualistic way to pray. He sees people holding the jiobei, the crescent-shaped wooden moon blocks used to ask the gods for a fortune.
Right, the moon blocks.
And he realizes no one else knows the complex rules of how to actually throw them and read the results.
He is an authentic practitioner of a culture, standing in a space dedicated to that culture, surrounded by people wearing the costumes of that culture.
Yeah.
And he has never been more alone.
That's the tragic irony. He went to Chinatown looking for a reflection of himself, looking for a community. But the Chinese culture in Jogja is a survival adaptation.
Right.
It is a scar left over from a political trauma he didn't personally experience.
Yeah.
He cannot relate to the Cinder experience because his roots in Taiwan were never forcibly erased by a dictator.
He just packed his roots in a suitcase and brought them with him.
Exactly. But the local community cannot relate to his unbroken Taiwanese heritage because they don't possess it anymore.
This is the essence of that double rootlessness. He is cut off from his homeland by distance, and he is cut off from the local diaspora by history.
It's a double bind.
It really is. He respects their survival, he defends their history, but acknowledging why they are the way they are doesn't make him feel any less isolated.
Which begs the question, if the language is gone, if the rituals are forgotten, and all that's left is cosplay and pop songs, is it still a culture? Or is it just a ghost?
Well, for the Sindo youth, it is absolutely their culture. It is the culture of survival. It is the culture of reclaiming a space that was denied to them for decades.
Fair point.
But for our author, yes, it is a ghost. It is a hollow shell that echoes with things he recognizes but just cannot connect with.
And if his culture is that fragmented, that ghostly inside the designated Chinatown, what happens when he steps outside of it?
Right, in the broader society.
What happens when Taiwanese culture enters everyday Indonesian society? That brings us to a part of the author's observations that genuinely stopped me in my tracks.
Oh, this part.
It's about boba tea.
It sounds so mundane, I know, but it is the perfect vehicle to understand his ultimate invisibility.
Boba, or bubble tea, is absolutely ubiquitous in Jogja. You can find it everywhere, from tiny street-side stalls, the warongs, to the most high-end, air-conditioned shopping malls.
But the economic contrast is staggering.
Staggering. Give us the breakdown of the pricing here, because it really highlights the status of the product.
Okay, so the author lays out the math perfectly. If an everyday person in Jogja goes to a local warong and orders a simple iced tea, an este, it is going to cost them somewhere between 3,000 and 7,000 rupiah.
Which is how much in USD?
In US dollars, that's roughly 20 to 40 cents.
Okay, very cheap.
It's a cheap, accessible daily refreshment. But if you walk into a premium mall and go to an international chain like Chatime or Xingfutang to buy a milk tea with boba, you are looking at 10 times that price, sometimes more.
10 times.
Add in a delivery app fee, and you are paying the equivalent of nearly 100 new Taiwan dollars or several US dollars for a single cup.
In the context of local wages, that is not a casual drink. That is a luxury item.
It is absolutely a status symbol.
Exactly. It's premium consumption. And the author walks into the Pakuan Mall, which is the biggest, glitziest shopping center in the region. Like, people drive in from surrounding cities just to walk around this mall.
Destination.
He sees a Xingfutang boba shop. And right there on the storefront, printed in massive letters for everyone to see, is the slogan, Taiwan #1.
It's claiming its heritage loudly and aggressively to justify the premium price.
And the author even has a laugh about this. He notes that if a shop in Taiwan put up a sign claiming to be #1, the consumer protection agencies would be knocking on their door demanding statistical proof of sales and market share.
Right. You can't just claim that.
But here in Indonesia, it's just a vibe. It's marketing magic.
But the magic trick only works because of a massive cognitive blind spot in the local population.
This is where I wanted to pause and debate this with you, because when I first read this, my immediate thought was, okay, this is textbook cultural appropriation.
It really looks like it.
Right. You have a dominant culture, or at least a massive commercial apparatus, taking a specific cultural product from a minority group, slapping a geographic label on it, stripping it of its authentic context, and selling it at a massive markup.
Yep.
In the West, we would write dozens of academic papers tearing this down.
It looks like appropriation on the surface, but the author pushes back on that framework entirely, and he does it by asking a very simple question.
Right. He starts asking his local Indonesian friends, his acquaintances, the actual people buying the drinks. He asks them, do you know that boba comes from Taiwan? Do you know that Shut Time is a Taiwanese brand?
And what do they say?
They have absolutely no idea.
Nothing.
It's a resounding blank stare. They don't know it's from Taiwan. In fact, they don't know that Asus or Acer, the laptops they might literally be using, are Taiwanese brands.
Why?
The author suspects most of them couldn't even point to Taiwan on a map. The only locals who might have a passing familiarity with Taiwan are the ones who follow global financial news and know about the semiconductor giant TSMC.
And even then, they probably only know it as a tangential part of the American AI boom with NVIDIA.
Exactly. So to the average person drinking that boba, Taiwan isn't a culture. It isn't a nation with a complex history. It is just a meaningless marketing buzzword synonymous with expensive sweet drink.
So how can it be cultural appropriation?
That's the thing.
The author argues that you cannot appropriate something from someone you don't even recognize as existing.
Right.
True cultural appropriation implies a power dynamic, yes, but it also implies recognition. It means the dominant culture sees the minority culture, recognizes its value, and steals it without giving credit.
Exactly. If someone steals your grandmother's secret recipe, makes millions off it, and tells everyone it's their own invention, that's appropriation.
But what's happening here is like someone stealing your grandmother's recipe, making millions off it, and crediting it to a mythical kingdom that no one actually believes is real.
It's wild. Taiwan is a blank slate to them. And the author's reaction to this realization isn't like righteous anger. It's not a demand for recognition.
Well, it's not.
It is a quiet, crushing resignation. He writes this incredibly heavy line. He says that if he were the boss of one of these multinational boba chains operating in Indonesia, he would probably do the exact same thing.
That's a sad admission.
He would downplay the actual Taiwanese identity just to save himself the exhausting effort of trying to explain his existence to people who don't care. He writes, use me, colonize me, as long as there's money to be made.
That line is devastating.
It really is.
He catches himself immediately and says he sounds like a colonial comprador.
Right.
You know, a local agent selling out to foreign interests. But the emotional truth beneath that dark sarcasm is profound isolation.
It's the realization that you aren't being misunderstood. To be misunderstood means someone is at least looking at you, trying to figure you out and getting it wrong.
But he is entirely unseen.
He is entirely unseen. He is a ghost in the mall, just like he was a ghost in Chinatown.
So these three layers, the maze of labels where he has no name, the hollow shell of a Chinatown where he has no community, and the bustling mall where his culture is consumed but he remains utterly invisible. These build the architecture of his isolation.
It's a structural trap.
Yes, this is the structural trap.
But knowing the architecture of a trap doesn't tell you what it actually feels like to be caught in it day after day, year after year.
No, it doesn't.
To explain the emotional reality of this isolation, the author shifts gears. He moves away from these sociological essays and writes two fictional short stories.
He creates an alter ego.
Right. A protagonist named Pronoto to carry the immense emotional weight of his lived experience.
And this transition is crucial. We're moving from the head to the heart now. While Pronoto is a fictional construct, the psychological landscape he navigates is undeniably the author's truth.
Let's look at Pronoto's life, because if you looked at him on paper, if you just read his resume, he is the ultimate success story of expatriate assimilation.
He really is.
He didn't just come to Indonesia for a 2-year stint to make some money and leave. He built a real life. He moved to Indonesia 10 years ago, right after college, and got a job at a Taiwanese-owned furniture factory in Cirebon.
And that is where he meets his wife, Siti.
Yes, Siti.
The author writes their origin story with such tenderness. Pranoto is this shy, stuttering young man trying to navigate a new country, and he's immediately captivated by Siti.
It's very sweet.
He loves her soft voice, her bright smile, and specifically he notes her large, round eyes, which remind him of his mother.
They date for 3 years, they fall deeply in love, and they decide to get married. They pool their savings, they get some financial help from Siti's parents, and they make a big move to Jogja, which is Siti's hometown.
A fresh start.
A completely fresh start. They open a restaurant together, Orang Pak Pranoto Taiwan Asli, authentic Taiwan, and they have a son, a little boy named Hartono.
It is the dream, right?
Yeah.
He did everything right. He learned the language fluently. He married into a warm, supportive local family. He started a business. He became a father. He successfully engineered that clean slate we talked about at the very beginning of this deep dive.
But the clean slate is a lie, because the past doesn't care about your new geography.
No, it doesn't. And the way the first story reveals this is a masterclass in slow-building tension.
The story takes place during the preparations for the Mid-Autumn Festival, which falls on September 17th. And the physical environment of their home is this beautiful, seamless blending of cultures.
It sounds lovely.
It is. They have closed the warung for the afternoon so they can prepare a private family dinner. Siti, his Indonesian wife, is in the kitchen cooking Javanese gudeg, a traditional, rich, slow-cooked jackfruit stew.
Sounds delicious.
While she's doing that, Pranoto is out in the yard, setting up a charcoal grill to make a traditional Taiwanese-style barbecue.
You have the Javanese stew simmering right next to the Taiwanese grill. It's a perfect visual representation of his synthesized life.
Exactly. And he's a stickler for the details of the holiday. He ordered specific traditional mooncakes well in advance. He didn't just grab whatever was at the local bakery. He got 2 lianji, which is the lotus seed paste, and 2 tausa, the red bean paste.
Oh, nice.
All with the traditional salted egg yolk in the center.
He is really holding on to the tactile pieces of his culture, the food, the rituals.
But as he is getting ready to run errands, he has to go pick up the mooncakes and pick up his 6-year-old son from kindergarten. The narrative cuts away from him. It stays with Siti and her family at the restaurant.
And this is where the tone shifts.
Completely. This is where the dark, heavy secret beneath this perfect expat life is finally spoken out loud.
Siti's family is sitting around, and they start talking about Pranoto. And the detail that emerges is just chilling.
What do they say?
On their wedding day, years ago, they had a beautiful ceremony. Friends from Taiwan who lived in Indonesia came. Siti's massive extended family was there. But not a single member of Pranoto's own family attended the wedding.
None of them. And it wasn't because they couldn't afford the flight. It wasn't a visa issue. He never invited them.
He never even told them he was getting married.
Siti is the only one who knows the truth, and she finally explains it to her parents. She tells them that when Pranoto was just a little boy, his mother died by suicide.
Oh, gosh.
She overdosed on sleeping pills. His father, completely broken and overwhelmed by the unimaginable grief of losing his wife, couldn't cope. Shortly after, the father also died by suicide.
It's just tragedy on top of tragedy.
He jumped off a bridge over a set of train tracks. Because of this double tragedy, Pranoto was orphaned and sent away from his home when he was only 6 years old.
I want to just sit with that for a second.
Yeah.
Because when you read that, everything about Pranoto's life recontextualizes instantly.
It changes everything.
He didn't just move to Indonesia for a job opportunity. He was fleeing. He was running as far and as fast as he could from a landscape haunted by the ghosts of his parents.
He packed his bags to escape a trauma that was physically tied to the bridges and the buildings of his homeland.
He was trying to outrun a deeply stigmatized, profoundly isolating grief. And he thought that by changing his language, changing his diet, changing his family, he could just leave that little 6-year-old orphan behind.
But here's the tragic paradox of his life. He moved to a new country to forget. But as a Taiwanese man, he still feels the deep, ingrained obligation to remember.
It's a horrible conflict.
He wants to pass his culture down to his son, Hartono. He wants to celebrate the Mid-Autumn Festival. But the culture he is trying to preserve is inextricably linked to the trauma he is trying to escape.
Right, because the culture demands memory.
Yes.
The Mid-Autumn Festival is literally a holiday, about family reunion, about looking at the moon and thinking of the people you love who are far away.
And the collision of these two forces, the desire to escape trauma and the cultural obligation to remember, happens on a motorcycle ride home from the kindergarten.
It is one of the most heartbreaking scenes I've ever read.
Walk us through it. The sensory details here are just vital.
Okay, so Pranoto picks up Hartono from school. The little boy is sitting on the front of the motorcycle, squeezed between his dad's arms, super excited to go home and eat the mooncakes.
That's sweet.
And Pranoto, trying to be a good father, trying to be the bridge to a culture his son has never seen, starts shouting a story over the rushing wind. He decides to tell his son the ancient Chinese myth of the Mid-Autumn Festival, the story of Hao Yi and Qin Yi.
A classic myth. But listen to the specific details of the story Pranoto chooses to tell here.
He tells his son about the great hero who shoots down the 9 scorching suns to save the earth. As a reward, the gods give the hero a magical potion, an elixir of immortality.
Okay, standard so far.
But bad men come to steal the potion while the hero is away. So his wife, Janji, to protect the magic, swallows the potion herself.
She swallows the potion.
When that happens to her, the potion makes her weightless. She begins to float. She floats out the window, higher and higher into the sky, drifting further away from her husband, until she lands on the moon, trapped there forever in the cold, leaving the people who loved her behind.
She swallows pills, and she floats away, leaving her family.
It is an exact, devastating parallel to his own mother.
Wow.
His mother overdosed on pills, became weightless to the world, and left him behind. He is literally speaking his own trauma out loud, disguised as a bedtime story.
And as the words are coming out of his mouth, the physical geography of Jogja suddenly conspires against him.
The route home takes them over the Lempuyangan flyover.
An overpass, a bridge.
A bridge over a set of active train tracks.
Yes. As Pranoto is telling the story about the wife who swallowed pills and vanished, his motorcycle crests the bridge. Down below them, a massive train rushes past at high speed.
The timing is terrible.
The sensory input is overwhelming. The vibration of the bridge, the roaring sound of the train rushing beneath his feet, the myth of the lost woman in his mouth. It is a perfect, inescapable trigger.
It perfectly recreates the environment of his father's suicide.
His brain cannot differentiate between the present and the past. The physical environment of his clean slate in Indonesia has just perfectly mimicked the site of his deepest trauma in Taiwan.
Pranoto's body reacts before his conscious mind can even try to stop it.
What happens?
He grips the handlebars and he starts shaking. He is trembling uncontrollably on the motorcycle, and the tears just start falling. He is weeping silently as he drives over the tracks.
And little Hartono, sitting right in front of him, feels his father's chest shaking against his back. He knows something is terribly wrong.
Kids always know.
They do. When they finally pull up to the restaurant, Hartono jumps off, runs straight to his mother, Sidi, and whispers, "Mama, Papa, sepertinya menangis." Papa seems to be crying.
Sidi, who knows exactly what day it is and exactly what trauma her husband carries, tries to soften the blow for her son. She whispers back, "Papa's probably just missing his parents today."
To which Hartono, who is only 6 and possesses that brutal innocence of children, replies loudly, "But I've never seen Papa's parents."
He exposes the void.
He does.
That is the moment Pranoto realizes he is trapped. He is invisible to the society around him, just another guy selling boba and noodles. But his past is hyper-visible to him.
The ghosts of his parents cross the ocean with him.
They're sitting on the back of his motorcycle.
It's a heavy, suffocating realization. He cannot outrun his own mind.
Let's take a breath.
Yeah.
Because the emotional weight of that scene is immense.
It really is.
The author could have ended the narrative there, with Pranoto broken on the motorcycle, but he doesn't. There is a second short story, a final chapter that shows us what happens after you realize you can't outrun your ghosts.
Right. The second story moves us forward exactly 1 year in time.
It's October 6th now, the date of the Mid-Autumn Festival for that year. Pranoto and Sidi are now in the 8th year of their marriage.
And they have made a significant life change. They packed up and moved out of the bustling city of Jogja, relocating to a quieter village on the outskirts.
And outwardly, the move makes perfect practical sense.
Right. They bought a bigger house with a yard. They wanted less academic pressure for Hartono, who is now 7. The village has streams where Pranoto can finally fulfill his quiet dream of going fishing on his days off.
Sounds idyllic.
And it puts them closer to Sidi's aging parents so they can help care for them. But the author includes one specific detail about their new home that changes the entire tone of the story.
What's the detail?
The house they bought sits directly across the street from a local village cemetery.
That is not a coincidence.
Not at all.
Thematically, the reality of death and the presence of those who have passed on is now physically sitting right on his doorstep. He used to live in the city, surrounded by distractions. Now, every time he looks out his front window, he sees the dead.
It's the evening of the Mid-Autumn Festival. The moon is full and bright. Sidi, who is always the practical, grounding force in his life, asks Pranoto to do a chore.
Right. Family is coming over.
Her entire extended family is coming over for a big dinner the next day, and the yard is a mess. She tells him to go out and burn the yard waste, all the dry leaves and garbage that have piled up.
Pranoto replies, "Yes, madam," in English.
Which is a cute detail.
It is. It shows the enduring warmth and playful dynamic of their marriage, even under the weight of his melancholy.
So Pranoto goes out to the north yard, the yard facing the cemetery. He recruits his son, Hartono, to help him gather the dry leaves into a large pile. And this is where the climax of the entire deep dive happens.
It's a quiet climax, but it is visually and emotionally stunning.
It is the ultimate clashing of rituals, the generational disconnect made physical.
Pranoto strikes a match and lights the pile of leaves. The flames crackle and shoot up into the dark sky. Pranoto stands there, staring deep into the fire.
And as he watches the flames, his mind drifts back to Taiwan.
He tells his son that when he was a little boy, on this exact night, his family used to gather under the full moon.
They would light a fire just like this, and they would burn paper money, ghost money for their ancestors, hoping the smoke would carry their blessings up to the heavens.
He is completely lost in this solemn, sacred memory of ancestor worship.
He is trying, once again, to pass a piece of his spiritual heritage to his son. But what is his Indonesian-born son doing?
Hartono is not experiencing a solemn moment of ancestral connection. He is an energetic 7-year-old boy. He sees a fire, and he wants to play.
Naturally.
So Hartono starts kicking at the edge of the burning pile. He is kicking the glowing embers up into the air, making sparks fly everywhere. He is laughing, mimicking the dramatic, erratic movements of the Songyang fire dance.
A traditional Balinese trance dance he probably saw on television or at a festival.
Just visualize the incredible layering of this single moment.
It's so cinematic.
Look at all the forces converging in this one yard. You have a quiet Indonesian cemetery looming in the background, a silent reminder of mortality. You have a young boy enthusiastically performing a Balinese trance dance, entirely absorbed in the culture of his birth.
And standing between them is a Taiwanese man trapped in a cultural memory of ancestor worship, staring into the flames.
It's a masterpiece of an image.
Pranoto snaps out of his reverie. He sees his son kicking the fire and panics. He yells at Hartono to stop, scolding him that it's too dangerous, that he could get burned.
But halfway through his scolding, Pranoto's voice just trails off.
He freezes completely.
The author describes a sudden shift in the atmosphere. A gentle breeze suddenly blows in from the north.
From the direction of the cemetery.
Exactly.
Pranoto feels the wind on his face. He turns his head back to the fire. And as he looks deep into the orange flames, the mundane reality of burning leaves disappears.
He sees faces.
He sees the smiling faces of his deceased parents right there in the fire. The mother who overdosed, the father who jumped, the parents who abandoned him to an orphanage, the parents he fled across an ocean to forget.
They are right there, looking back at him from the embers.
It is a moment of pure magical realism born out of profound psychological exhaustion.
Hartono sees his father's face go completely rigid. The boy gets scared. He doesn't understand what's happening, so he yells toward the house for his grandfather Sidi's father to come outside.
The grandfather walks out into the yard. He sees Pranoto trembling, staring fixedly into the fire. He asks him what's wrong.
Pranoto, his voice shaking, says he felt a wind from the cemetery. And he confesses to his father-in-law that he just saw his parents. He says, "They were smiling at me in the fire."
Now, in many cultures, or in a different kind of story, the rational father-in-law would tell him he's imagining things.
Right, you tell him it's just the smoke or that he's overtired.
He would tell him to let the past go and move on.
But the Indonesian grandfather doesn't do that. He doesn't dismiss the ghosts. He steps close to Pranoto. He smiles a warm, deeply understanding smile. And he whispers into his son-in-law's ear, "They have returned to gather with us."
They have returned to gather with us. It is the most profound line in the entire collection.
It gave me absolute chills when I read it. Because the grandfather is validating Pranoto's haunting.
He is inviting the ghosts of Pranoto's tragic past to join their Indonesian family dinner.
We have to understand the gravity of this resolution. This is not a triumphant Hollywood ending. Trauma is not magically healed. The pain of his parents' suicide doesn't vanish. What happens in that yard is a moment of quiet, melancholic acceptance.
Pronoto finally realizes the truth about his clean slate. He realizes that his homesickness isn't for a physical place in Taiwan anymore. He isn't longing for a street corner in Taipei.
He's longing for a time and a familial connection that no longer exists in the physical world.
He has spent 10 years fighting a war against his own memory. He tried to outrun his ghosts by moving to a place where he was a ghost himself.
But the grandfather's words give him permission to stop running. The grandfather is telling him, your ghosts are real, they are here, and there is room for them in this yard.
Pronoto has to accept that the trauma of his parents and the heavy, melancholic weight of his culture are going to sit at his Indonesian dinner table forever.
They are not baggage to be abandoned. They are the permanent foundation of his new life.
So when we zoom out and look at all of this, the complex linguistic maze, the hollowed-out Chinatown, the invisible culture in the mall, and the ghosts in the fire, what is the ultimate synthesis here?
What are these sources telling us about the human condition?
Yes.
They were showing us the inescapable architecture of ourselves. The overarching theme is that isolation isn't just about being alone, it's about being untethered from context.
Untethered from context.
To be this Taiwanese expat in Indonesia is to exist in a perpetual state of double rootlessness. You seek out the local Chinese community, but their culture is an ornamental shell severed from its origins by a brutal political history you didn't share.
And you go to the modern spaces and your culture is commodified, slapped with a Taiwan #1 sticker by people who don't even know your country exists.
You are utterly invisible to the world. But when you go home, into the quiet of your own mind, the personal trauma you tried to leave behind is hyper-visible.
It is woven into the very fabric of the holidays you are culturally obligated to celebrate.
You are a blank slate to everyone else, but you are a crowded, haunted room to yourself.
And that is the paradox of relocation. You think you are packing a suitcase full of clothes and practical items. You think you're leaving the heavy things behind.
But trauma and cultural memory, they aren't heavy objects. They are seeds.
Wow, seeds.
You accidentally pack a handful of seeds from your native soil in the lining of your suitcase. And the moment you set them down in a new country, the moment the humidity of a new life hits them, they sprout.
And suddenly you are living in a forest of your own memories right in the middle of a foreign land.
The geography changes, but the soul does not.
I want you listening to this right now to think about the seeds in your own suitcase. We constantly sell ourselves the myth of reinvention. We think a new job, a new relationship, a new city will suddenly make us a new person.
But Pronoto's story proves that the past is the one thing you can never outrun, because it is the very machinery you are using to do the running.
You can change the name tag on your chest, you can let them call you whatever they want, but you cannot change the ghosts in the fire.
You really can't.
Which leaves me with one final lingering thought for you to carry with you today. Imagine packing your bags tomorrow. You move to a place where no one understands your language, where your country's name means absolutely nothing to the people passing you on the street.
Where the local version of your heritage is just a costume worn for a festival.
Right. If you strip away all external recognition and you are left completely alone with nothing but your memories, the beautiful ones and the unbearable ones, what exactly is the you that remains?
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the quiet, complex corners of identity.
We appreciate you taking the time to listen. Until next time.